Alright, Daniel 70 weeks. My battery ran out on me, so I'm starting all over on this. Daniel 70 weeks. I'm not going to go through all of it, but 70 weeks basically equates 490 years. 1 week equals 7 years. So whatever week Daniel says, just multiply that by 7 and you'll get the number of years. But Daniel was talking about the end of all things, because he clearly says, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Daniel is saying we have 490 years, a total of 490 years before the end of all things, when the Messiah returns. So what Daniel is basically going into is, he's saying to pay attention. Know therefore and understand. So he's basically saying what I'm about to say is very important. Pay attention. He says that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks. And remember, you take the weeks, whatever the weeks is, and you multiply that by 7. So 7 times 7 is 49. It took 49 years to rebuild the temple. Because remember, the Persian Empire in 445 BC basically permitted and encouraged Israel to rebuild the temple and restore themselves, etc., etc. It took 49 years to rebuild the temple. But see, Daniel says all of this, the 7 weeks and 62 weeks. In other words, 7 weeks plus 62 weeks. So that's 49 plus 62. So 7 weeks multiplied by 7 is 49 years. 62 weeks multiplied by 7, that's 434 years. That's a total of 483 years. So from the time that Israel was given permission to go ahead and regather by the Persian Empire, 483 years, when you follow the Jewish calendar of 360 days, not 365 days. When you follow the Jewish calendar, 483 years later puts us right at the ministry of Jesus. Not baby Jesus, not after Jesus was dead, not teenage Jesus, right at his ministry. And what happened to the Messiah? What Daniel says, and after those 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Jesus was rejected by Israel. And this is why Orthodox Jews mess around with Daniel and the book of Daniel so much. Some of them go as far as saying Daniel wasn't a prophet. Some of them go as far as saying that the book is fabricated, or it's not accurate. They're doing that because they know if Daniel is right, it exposes them and shows that they rejected the Messiah. They just refuse to accept the fact that Jesus was the Messiah. It's their blindness that the scriptures talk about. But time stops at 483 years, so we're left with another year. Another week, which is 7 years. This is why you get people saying that tribulation period, Jacob's trouble, is 7 years. So what does Daniel go on to say? He says, and the prince and the people of the prince that shall come. This is not the Messiah. Just because you read Messiah the Prince does not mean that the prince that shall come is the same person. This is talking about the Antichrist, the false Messiah. So time actually stopped. But see, what Daniel goes on to say, he says, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. This is why I said at the very beginning, it's 490 years total, but 483 years have already happened. But the time stopped when Israel rejected the Messiah. So that's leaving us with another 7 years, because 490 minus 483 equals 7. So it's leaving us with 1 final week. This is the tribulation period. This is Jacob's trouble. And what Daniel says is, and in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblations to cease, etc., etc. In other words, in the middle of that 7-year tribulation period, in the middle of Jacob's trouble, he's going to betray Israel. He's going to turn his back on the Jews. And that's what Daniel is saying. And what we're saying as Christians is this did not happen in the first century. It didn't happen it hasn't happened yet. So the preterist position, it's actually just another laughable cult. It's just another laughable pseudo-Christian delusion. And I proved this because I dealt with who and what the Antichrist is, and who and what the Antichrist must do. The Messiah must be a Jew. When we did our delivery, when we shared the platform, I said all these things. The Messiah must be a Jew, not just any old Jew. He must be a descendant of David. If you tell a Jew that I'm the Messiah, and you can't even prove you're a descendant of David, they're not going to listen to you. They're not. And this is why the genealogy of Jesus is the first thing you read in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew was primarily written to the Jews. Now, how do we know that the Antichrist is also going to be a Jew? Because the scriptures tell us he does not honor the God of his fathers. God of our fathers is a phrase that only an Israelite can say. A Gentile cannot say of our fathers. A Gentile Christian cannot say of our fathers, because we do not descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Stop. You all need to stop with this spiritual Abraham's your spiritual father. And then inserting Isaac as your spiritual father and Jacob as your spiritual father. I understand what the scriptures say, but you cannot say they are your fathers. No Gentile ever said that. No Gentile ever went around claiming to be a Jew. Regardless of what Paul said, that's a New Age false interpretation. It's an over-exaggeration. No Christian went around saying, I'm a Jew, just because they converted. It didn't happen. So the Antichrist must be a descendant of David, and he'll prove it somehow. Also, the Messiah must be king. Not only must he be a king, he must be a world ruler. Because in the Psalms it says he will rule the nations of the earth. And in Revelation says the same thing. He will rule the nations with an iron rod. But the Antichrist, he's going to be a what? He's going to be a world ruler. He's going to be king, per se. The Antichrist must also be a high priest. He's not in the order of Aaron. He's in the order of Melchizedek. Because Melchizedek is the only one who was a high priest and king. No high priest from Aaron onward was also a king. No king from Saul onward was also a high priest. The position of king and high priest is meant for the Messiah and the Messiah only. No other person. This is why King Saul was cut off from the kingdom when he tried to be king. This is why King Uzziah was struck with leprosy when he tried to be priest. When Saul tried to be priest. When both these kings attempted to be priests, God punished them. Because that's an offense to God. But the Antichrist, according to Daniel, and even Jesus said, when you see the abomination standing in the holy place. The holy place is the holy of holies of the temple. Only the high priest can enter the holy of holies. No regular priest and no citizen can do that. So the Antichrist, so far, he will be a Jew, a descendant of David. He will be king because he's world ruler. He will also be high priest. That's clear in the book of Daniel and Jesus, the Gospels of Jesus. But then the Messiah must also bring peace to Israel. And this is one thing that the Jews never understood. He just didn't understand it. The Messiah must bring peace to Israel. That's why they rejected Jesus. One of the reasons. They try to make Jesus their king. Remember, they try to grab him and make him their king, but he resisted. In their hearts, he was already their king, but he was the one who resisted because he knows it was not the right time yet. Like Moses, he goes to Israel twice. The first time, he must be rejected. He must leave. He'll marry a Gentile wife, just like Moses, but the Gentile wife is the form of the Gentile church. And the second time he goes, they will embrace him because he is the prophet like unto Moses. But the Messiah must bring peace to Israel. He will do that in his second coming. But the Antichrist, what did the scripture say? It says that he will destroy many with what? With peace. he will destroy many with peace. And also, I already told you in the Daniel 70 weeks that in the middle of the week, he's going to betray Israel. He's going to turn his back on them. And the Messiah must also have a ministry of miracles, a miracle working ministry, basically. That's prophecy. And this is why when John the Baptist, when his disciples went to Jesus asking, hey, are you the one we're supposed to be looking for? Or, are we to be looking for another one? What did Jesus answer? He never just said, yes, I'm the Messiah. He never did. It seems like he was hiding his messianic nature, but always revealing his divine nature. And I've done a video on that. So I'm not going to go into details here, but Jesus answered. He didn't answer in riddles. A lot of people don't even know this. He answered with prophecy. He said, go and tell John what you see. The lame walk, the blind see, etc., etc. That's prophecy, because the prophecies say that these things will happen when the Messiah comes. But what does the Antichrist do? Scriptures say that he comes doing what? He's working lying wonders. In other words, false miracles. Do you all see what I'm telling you? 5 things that Jews look for in the Messiah are the very 5 things the Antichrist will mimic. He will be a descendant of David. He will be king and world ruler. He will be high priest of the temple. He will bring peace, even though it's a false peace, to Israel. And he will be working lying wonders. In other words, false miracles. The 5 things that the Messiah must do, this false Messiah will do. And this is why people need to stop thinking that the Messiah is just going to bum rush Israel and force his way into the temple. The scriptures don't tell you that. The scriptures say nothing of the sort. What happens is Israel accepts him as their Messiah because they're convinced he is, because he's meeting all the criteria. So anyway, I'm going to go into another video. I've had a few problems. The battery ran out, the camera fell because of the tripod. So I'm going to stop this one and go into maybe, I guess I'm at part 3. I'm going to deal with Babylon, how Babylon must fall before the Messiah returns. Obviously, Babylon did not fall in the 1st century. It still exists, and I'm going to go into that. And then I'm going to wrap up with the Messiah, who the Messiah is, what he must do, and some elements out of Revelation. These things did not happen in the first century. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or whatever century. It hasn't happened. So, and I think William Bell, he was upset because I was pitching these things. Again, we're just dealing with our beliefs. And for whatever reason, he can't handle it, or he feels he's going to have to try and distort it as best he can, which is what they do. All they do is distort the Word of God. I mean, let's be real. If they distort the scriptures, should I be surprised that he's misrepresenting me in his video? No, I'm not surprised at all. I've been doing this for so long. I know if they will distort the Word of God, it's easy for them to distort what I say. Because who am I? Who am I compared to God? So anyway, the next video is going to deal with Babylon, showing that Babylon must fall before the Messiah returns. Therefore, the Messiah could not have possibly come in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, or 4th, or 5th, or 6th, whatever century, because Babylon still exists. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with the Messiah, what he's supposed to do when he returns, showing that nothing that the Messiah is supposed to do when he returns occurred in the 1st century. And then I'm going to deal with some elements in Revelation, showing also that none of these things occurred in the 1st century. So the preterist position is just, it's flamboyant. It's a horrible misrepresentation of the scriptures is what it is. I mean, I thought Jehovah's Witnesses were bad, but this is definitely up there with horrible and deliberate distortion of the Word of God. So we'll see you in the next round. Hopefully part 3 will be the final.